Hello, everyone. We are live, and I get a lot of questions around distributed agile teams working agreement. If you are working in a distributed agile environment and you have not revisited your agile agreement, it's a good time to do that. It's a good time to sit with the team virtually, that is, and agree on some ground rules that will allow you to work better together. So let's go over some of the things, aside from the things that you might already have in your working agreement. Keeping some of those good stuff that's unique. It's a fingerprint in terms of how the team agrees to work, and that includes rules of respect and other aspects. But specific to distributed agile teams, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you need to consider in that regard. And number one is the area of tools. You're going to need to talk about tools. You're going to need to talk about areas relating to what kind of tools are we going to use, and we're going to have some examples on each of these. But first, I want to give you that comprehensive list. And the second one that's really important is updating the artifacts. How are we going to update our artifacts in a distributed environment or in a digital format? And contacting team members. How do we contact each other? What does that look like? Before we could tap each other over the shoulder, and now that might not be possible, right? Focus time. Focus time is around the idea that we might have some kind of way of signaling each other in terms of the fact that, hey, I got heads down work right now, and I can't be disturbed. So let's have an agreement on how do we observe that and respect that. Meeting rooms, that's very important. And by meeting rooms, of course, we mean virtual rooms. How are we going to manage that aspect of it? And the meeting rules, it's a whole different environment. How we're meeting is completely different. Before, we might have had a talking stick. Now we've got to utilize some of the various tools available to us to do that. So let's agree on how we use those. And emergency maneuvers. Well, what is that? We'll talk about that in a minute. But we need to prepare for emergencies. And then there are things that are unique to your team. Maybe if you're working in software, you need to agree on code check-in and things of that nature, right? How are we doing that so we're not stepping over each other in a code sense, right? So we talked about the tools. Things that are important for tools are important in relation to how are we going to be connecting. So let me give you a picture of that and what that might look like from our perspective. I just realized I'm not sharing here. I want to be able to give you that view. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go to my Trusting Logitech here, and I'm going to change the angle on the camera, and that should give us the ability to see the screen now, so you're able to see what I see. And I think you're seeing it the right way. Yep, I'm getting thumbs up. Thank you for acknowledging that you're seeing that. So now we get to see those items. So we talked about tools being an important aspect. What tools will we be using to communicate? Are we going to communicate over Slack? Are we going to communicate using Teams? Let's agree on the tools and how we're going to utilize those tools for communication. It might be a no-brainer for some teams. Other teams are struggling because if I'm using one tool and you're using another, we're going to miss each other. Updating artifacts, things like when are the backlog items expected to be updated? When is our sprint backlog expected to be updated if we're using Jira, for example? Some teams are asking for that to be in real time, but we all need to agree to do that. A digital artifact is as good as its last update. If it's out of sync, I'm not going to go back because I'm not going to trust it. And then I'm going to start contacting individuals and maybe even bothering you to understand where we are in terms of those items because I don't trust the tool anymore. So we need to agree on ensuring that the artifacts that are represented in that tool are up to date. Other elements that are important are things like when can we contact each other? We might have time zone distribution here. Time zone disbursement is very common now. My 5 o'clock is maybe your 10 o'clock p.m. and that can get in the way of work-life balance. So let's agree on when can we contact each other, and maybe even have a level of contact depending on the gravity of what I need, right? I worked in organizations where picking up the phone was reserved for when the house was on fire. The rest, we had various ways of communicating. It was just company culture. Agreeing as a team to do it in a particular way is very important. Focus time, I mentioned head down work, right? If we're going to be focusing, how do we know that you're available or that you are not being disturbed? Maybe I'm observing the do not disturb sign. Maybe we have some other way of signaling that in Slack. If we're using Slack as a tool, that might be a good mechanism for us to agree. Again, this is about a common understanding. There's no wrong answer here. These are the areas that you need to consider as a team, and as long as we have an agreement between the full team, we're in a good position, right? The meeting rooms, well, we are in the age of Zoom. Maybe we're using Teams. Maybe we're using other things like Hangout or WebEx. Let's agree in terms of what those rooms are, and how do I get to those? Do I send you a new meeting room every time we're meeting, or is there a permanently opened room? I worked in an organization where we implemented a permanently virtual room that was meant for casual social conversations, and it worked very well to breach the distance between the team members that were remote. So again, working agreements in terms of how are we treating our rooms. Let's talk about that. Meeting rules. What if I can't make an online meeting because my network went down? How do I let you know that? What if I got caught in traffic? Bringing my kids to school and I can't make that meeting. Can I attend remotely? Let's agree on some of those team rules. And if we are in the team, are we expected to be muted? Do we agree to share video as a team? Is that an expected behavior, right? So again, these things create a form of respect. It is a way for us to continue to work more effectively as a team and avoid conflicts that might arise from miscommunication, right? Emergency maneuvers. Well, what if I have an urgent issue at 4 a.m? How do I handle it? Do I wake everybody up? Is that part of our emergency maneuver? Or do I try specific items relating to our product in terms of troubleshooting? Is there a contact list for that? How do we handle emergencies that might come up? Let's come up with some emergency maneuvers so that the least impact is felt when these things happen, right? And lastly, on this list, I mentioned things that are specific to your team. This is an example: code check-in and code check-out. How do I check the code, and what is the expected process for that, so that we're not overriding or stepping over each other? You might have different needs as far as your teams and how you handle the processes, but let's agree on that. These are things that before were sort of a given. A paper cup across the aisle might have done the job, but today we need to be more methodical and clear about how we're working together. And revisiting our team working agreement is a phenomenal way for us to A, have the conversation, B, agree as a team, and 3, be better than we were before while we're working now in a distributed environment. Yeah. So thank you for attending, and we'll see you again for our next session.